My dearest listener, come sit by the fire. The wind sings a mournful song tonight, one that stirs old memories from their slumber. I have a story to tell you, not of great wars or clashing steel, though such things form its backdrop. This is a story of a different kind of battle, fought in the silent chambers of the heart. It is the story of a rose that was both a blessing and a curse, and of the love that made it bloom. I warn you, it is a tale woven with threads of both joy and sorrow, but it is one I must tell, for to let it fade into silence would be a greater tragedy than any it contains. So pour yourself some wine, draw your chair closer, and let us journey back to the kingdom of Valdor, in the deep of a winter that promised everything, and took just as much. Part 1. The White Rose in the Snow. The kingdom of Valdor was a tapestry of stone and frost, of ancient houses and older secrets. Its heart was the capital Viridian, a city of spires that clawed at a sky the color of bruised steel for most of the year. Snow fell not in gentle flurries, but in great relentless sheets, blanketing the cobbled streets and frosting the gargoyles that kept watch from the eaves of the great keep. Within those stone walls, life was a different kind of storm, a whirlwind of politics, power, and the delicate, deadly dance of courtly intrigue. It was a world of whispers, where a glance could promise an alliance or a dagger, and where the warmth of a fire was often the only comfort to be found. And in this world there was Liana Verden. To call her merely a courtesan was to call the northern lights merely a weather pattern. She was an institution, a whispered legend. She did not reside in the bustling lower city, but in a graceful, secluded manse known as the House of Silver Mists, perched on a cliff edge where the river, not yet fully frozen, carved a dark ribbon through the white landscape. She was beauty, yes, of a kind that made poets feel inadequate, hair the shade of rich mahogany, eyes the color of twilight just before the stars emerge, a face of such perfect symmetry it seemed carved by a sorrowful god. But it was her mind that was her true art. She could discuss naval treaties with admirals, philosophy with scholars, and the latest court gossip with duchesses, all with an effortless grace that made each feel they were the only person in the room. And always there was the rose, a single perfect white bloom, nestled like a sleeping dove in the intricate coils of her hair. It was never wilted, never bruised, its petals holding a pearlescent sheen even in the dead of winter. They said it was enchanted, a gift from a spurned fey lord or a blessing from some forgotten hearth goddess. The rumor whispered on the cold air was that the rose lived, vibrant and eternal, so long as Liana's heart remained open to love. It was a beautiful, perilous myth, and she neither confirmed nor denied it. The rose was simply a part of her, a silent, blooming sigil. It was at the height of the Frostfire Masquerade, the grandest event of the deep winter, that their paths first crossed. The great hall of Viridian was a spectacle of heat and light, a defiance of the howling dark outside. 1,000 candles flickered in crystal chandeliers, their flames reflected in the polished onyx floor, and the gemstones adorning the swirling, masked figures. The air was thick with the scent of mulled wine, beeswax, and perfumes vying for dominance. Liana moved through the throng like a ghost, a vision in a gown of deep emerald silk that whispered against the stone. Her mask was simple, a swirl of silver filigree that only accentuated the profound depth of her eyes. The white rose, as always, was her only crown. She had come not for intrigue or assignation, but to observe. She was a collector of truths, and truths were laid bare at such events, visible in the tension of a shoulder, the tremor of a hand, the words left unsaid in a crowded room. She had retreated to a shadowed archway that led to one of the many frozen balconies, a glass of ice wine cool in her hand, watching the pageant of power unfold. It was there he found her, or perhaps it was there they found each other. He was tall, broad-shouldered, even in the elegant dark velvet of his doublet. His mask, a simple affair of black leather shaped like a hawk, did little to conceal the earnest, clean-lined strength of his jaw or the startling clarity of his eyes, the color of a summer sky over the northern fjords. He was not like the other courtiers. Their grace was practiced, a weapon. His was innate, the easy confidence of a man raised not in gilded halls, but in vast, honest landscapes. He was Aris Daynar, second son of Lord Daynar of the Northern Reach, a house known more for its steadfast honor and its formidable, ice-locked fortress Greyspire than for its presence at the decadent court of Viridian. He stood beside her, not too close, his gaze not on the revelry, but on the same quiet corner of the hall she had been studying. "They dance as if the floor were a battlefield," he said, his voice a low, warm baritone that cut through the shrill laughter and music with a startling intimacy. Liana turned her head a fraction, the petals of her rose brushing against her cheek. "Is it not?" she replied, her own voice soft as velvet. "Every step is a calculation, every turn a feint. The only thing missing is the blood on the snow." He looked at her then, truly looked, and she felt the weight of his gaze not as an appraisal, but as a recognition. It was not the look men usually gave her. A mixture of hunger, curiosity, and ownership. This was different. It was as if he were seeing past the emerald silk, past the famed beauty, past the myth of the rose, and straight into the quiet, watchful woman beneath. "You see it too," he said, a statement, not a question. "The performance. It is the only thing to see, my lord," she said, a faint, knowing smile touching her lips. "The masks they wear are merely an echo of the ones they wear every day." He gestured slightly with his own glass, a simple, unpretentious movement. "And you? Do you wear one?" It was a bold question, the kind that could have been impertinent from another. From him it felt like genuine inquiry. Liana considered him, this northern sun with summer in his eyes. The music swelled, a waltz of strings and woodwinds that seemed to pull at the very air between them. "Perhaps," she said softly, "but some masks are for protection, not performance." She did not know why she admitted it. It was a crack in her own formidable armor, a sliver of truth offered to a stranger. The air around them seemed to still, the cacophony of the masquerade fading into a distant hum. It was in that suspended moment that a passing lord, drunk and boisterous, stumbled against Aris. The impact was slight, but it was enough to send a splash of dark red wine arcing from Aris's glass, staining the pristine sleeve of Liana's gown. The drunkard blustered an apology and moved on, but Aris's face flooded with horrified chagrin. "My lady, I am so terribly sorry. My clumsiness." He fumbled for a handkerchief, a plain, practical square of linen, utterly unlike the lace-edged silks the courtiers carried. Before he could proffer it, Liana raised her hand. "Peace, my lord. It is but a little wine. It will wash away." But he was already kneeling, a gesture so shockingly out of place in this den of posturing equals that it stole the breath from her lungs. He did not touch her, but he was close, his head bowed over the stain on the emerald silk, his posture one of profound, unfeigned regret. The crowd around them began to notice. Whispers started like kindling catching fire. "The northern brute soiled the Verden rose, what a scene!" "Please," Liana said, her voice barely a whisper. "Rise. You draw more attention to us by kneeling." He looked up and his eyes, full of sincere apology, met hers. In their blue depths she saw no calculation, no awareness of the spectacle he was creating. He saw only that he had marred something of beauty, and he was truly sorry. It was a purity of emotion she had not encountered in years, perhaps ever. It was as disarming as a physical blow. He rose slowly, his gaze never leaving hers. "Allow me to make amends," he said, his voice low and earnest. "A walk in the gardens? The air is cold, but it is clean. It will wash the scent of spilled wine and courtly perfumes from our senses." It was a mad suggestion. The gardens were frozen, desolate. To be seen leaving the ball with him alone would fuel the gossip for weeks. She, the pragmatic, the guarded, the one who mastered the game, should have refused with a polite, dismissive smile. But she did not. She placed her hand on the arm he offered, a simple, solid arm, and felt the strong muscle beneath the velvet. "A clean scent would be welcome," she said. And so Liana Verden, the Rose of Valdor, and Aris Daynar, the Northern Lord's son, walked away from the heat and the light, through the archway and out into the silent, silvered world of the winter night. The cold was a slap, a bracing, beautiful shock after the oppressive warmth of the hall. Their breath plumed in the air, twin ghosts mingling under a sky dusted with a million diamond-sharp stars. The royal gardens were a sculpture gallery of ice. Trees were encased in crystal, their branches bearing glistening burdens. Frost flowers bloomed on the iron railings of a nearby bridge, and a path of crushed quartz, meticulously cleared of the latest snowfall, wound its way between frozen hedges. The only sound was the crunch of their footsteps and the distant, mournful cry of a winter owl. They walked in a silence that was not awkward but profound. It was as if the masks they had spoken of had truly been left behind in the hall. Here, under the vast, indifferent sky, there was no need for words. The connection that had sparked between them in the shadowed archway now settled over them like a blanket, quiet and certain. After a long while, they stopped at a balustrade overlooking the frozen river. The city lights of Viridian twinkled on the far bank, their reflections shimmering on the ice below. "It's so quiet," Aris murmured, his voice respectful of the hush. "At Greyspire, the silence has a weight to it. It's a presence. Here in the city, you forget what true silence sounds like. Or what true honesty feels like," Liana added, her gaze fixed on the star-dusted ice. She turned to him. "You are not like the others at court, Lord Daynar." "Aris," he said, "please." "And no, I suppose I am not. I find the air here difficult to breathe. It is thick with ambition and deceit. I feel like a stag trapped in a room full of silk curtains." A soft laugh escaped her, a genuine, uncalculated sound that surprised even her. A most apt description. They would indeed hunt you, though with words instead of arrows. "And you?" he asked, turning to lean his back against the balustrade, facing her. "How does a stag survive in such a place?" The question was perilously close to the heart of things. She looked at him, at the way the moonlight carved the planes of his face, at the open curiosity in his eyes. The cold should have been biting, but she felt a strange, warm current flowing between them, a magic far more tangible than any whispered enchantment of a rose. "I am not a stag, Aris," she said quietly. "I am one of the curtains. Perhaps the most intricate one, but a curtain nonetheless. I have learned the patterns of the hunt. I know how to blend, how to obscure, how to remain valuable so I am not simply torn down. He studied her, his expression serious. I think you do yourself a disservice. I see no curtain. I see a woman of remarkable perception, standing in a frozen garden, risking her reputation to grant a clumsy northern fool a moment of peace. His words, so simple and direct, undid her. They bypassed all her defenses, all the carefully constructed walls she had spent a lifetime building. She had been loved for her beauty, desired for her body, valued for her wit and connections. But she had never been seen. Not like this. She did not know who moved first. Perhaps it was the world that tilted. But suddenly they were closer. The space between them, charged with the cold and the starlight, vanished. His hand, bare and warm despite the chill, came up to gently cup her cheek. His thumb stroked the skin just beside her lips, a touch so reverent it made her heart clench. "Liana," he whispered, and her name on his lips was a prayer, a secret, a promise. And then he kissed her. It was not a kiss of conquest or practiced seduction. It was a question, an offering. His lips were warm and firm against hers, a point of blazing heat in the vast, cold night. It tasted of cold air and honesty, of mulled wine and a future she had never dared to imagine. A shockwave of pure, undiluted feeling went through her, so powerful it felt like pain and ecstasy woven into a single blinding thread. She felt her own hands come up to clutch at the front of his doublet, not to push him away, but to anchor herself against the vertigo of it all. When they finally parted, breathless, their breath misting together in a single cloud, the world had changed. The garden was no longer a place of frozen death, but a cathedral of ice, hallowed by their kiss. The stars seemed brighter, the silence more profound. Liana looked up at him, her twilight eyes wide, her soul laid bare. The white rose in her hair seemed to pulse with a soft inner light, its perfume, usually so subtle, now intoxicatingly sweet on the frozen air. Aris looked at her with a kind of awe, as if he had just unlocked a mystery of the universe and found his own reflection at its center. "I have been at sea my whole life," he breathed, his forehead resting against hers. "And I have just found my shore." In that moment, under the cold, watchful stars of Valdor, the story began. Not as a courtly dalliance, not as a scandal, but as a destiny. And high above, in the highest tower of the great keep, a window stood open. A figure, wrapped in furs, watched the two small forms on the garden balcony. It was Lord Daynar, Aris's father. His face, a granite mask of ambition and cold pride, was impassive, but his eyes, the same blue as his son's, though frozen over with decades of calculation, narrowed to slits. He saw the kiss. He saw the way his son looked at the woman, and in that seeing, the first stone of a coming avalanche was dislodged. But for Liana and Aris there was only the now, only the echo of a kiss, the warmth of a hand, and the terrifying, glorious certainty that nothing would ever be the same again. Part 2. A tangle of thorn and silk. The days that followed the Frostfire masquerade were not marked by the slow, predictable turn of the hourglass, but by the frantic, stolen beats of Liana's heart. The world, once a complex but navigable map of courtly maneuvers, had been redrawn in the stark, beautiful lines of before and after. The memory of Aris's kiss was a brand upon her soul, a warmth she carried with her into the coldest of rooms. The white rose in her hair seemed to respond to this internal shift. Its petals unfurled with a new, almost defiant vitality. There sent a private, constant reminder of the frozen garden and the summer in his eyes. Yet paradise, once glimpsed, makes the confines of the world feel more like a prison. Her life at the House of Silver Mists continued with its accustomed rhythm, the visits from powerful men seeking counsel as much as companionship, the whispered conversations with Tion Morval, her oldest and only true friend. Tion was the court's chief herbalist and healer, a man with eyes the color of weathered bark and a stillness that seemed to soak up the anxieties of others. He noticed the change in her immediately. "The rose has a new luster, Liana," he remarked one afternoon, his long fingers carefully sorting dried moon petal leaves in her sunlit solar. The room was an oasis of warmth, filled with the scent of herbs and the gentle crackle of the fire. "It glows as if it has swallowed a piece of the sun." Liana, who was embroidering by the window, her needle moving with uncharacteristic agitation, did not look up. "The winter light can be deceptive, Tion." "It is not the light," he said, his tone gentle but firm. "It is the life within it. The magic, it responds to you. You know this." He paused, setting down a leaf. "There is a new energy in your spirit, a lightness. It is a beautiful thing to witness, but remember, a flame that burns twice as bright, burns half as long," she finished for him, the old adage tasting like ash in her mouth. She finally met his gaze. "I am not a flame, Tion. I am a woman." "You are Liana Verden," he corrected softly. "And that has always been a more complicated thing." He was right, of course. The complication arrived, as it always did, in the form of the world's expectations. The first warning came from Lady Seraphine, a duchess whose loyalty was as fickle as a spring breeze, and whose gossip was a currency more valuable than gold. She visited under the pretext of seeking advice on a new perfume, her sharp eyes missing nothing. "My dear," she purred, sipping her spiced wine, "the talk of the court is quite riveting. It seems the young Daynar heir made quite an impression at the masquerade. They say he spent a considerable amount of time in the gardens, with a certain lady known for her botanical adornment." She gestured delicately with her glass towards Liana's hair. Liana's smile was a masterpiece of placid indifference. "The gardens were a welcome respite from the heat, my lady. Lord Daynar was merely expressing his regret for a minor accident with his wine. Northerners are known for their earnest manners." "Earnest, yes," Seraphine mused, her eyes glinting. "But his father, Lord Cairn, is not a man of manners. He is a man of ambition. He has come to court for one reason, to secure a powerful alliance for his house, an alliance that would be severely compromised by an association with—" She let the sentence hang in the air, fragrant with implication. "A celebrated courtesan." The words were not new. They were the same arrows that had been shot at her for years. But this time each one found its mark, not in her pride, but in a new, tender and terrifying place in her heart, her fear for Aris. Meanwhile, Aris was navigating his own labyrinth of stone and disapproval. His father's chambers in the keep were a testament to cold utility. No tapestries, no frivolities. Only maps of Valdor, charts of lineage, and the stark, functional furniture of a military campaign. "You have been seen," Lord Cairn Daynar said, his voice like the grinding of glaciers. He stood before the great fireplace, his back to his son, a silhouette of impenetrable authority. With the Verden woman, Aris, who had been buoyed by a week of secret, hopeful longing, felt his spirit solidify into a hard, defensive knot in his chest. "I have. She is the most intelligent and captivating person I have met at this court." Cairn turned, his face a mask of cold fury. She is a courtesan, a well-kept whore with a clever tongue. Do not be a fool, boy. Your value is your name, your blood. It is the only currency that matters in this game. And you would spend it on a whispered fantasy? On a flower that is probably kept fresh by some cheap alchemist's trick. It is not a trick. Aris's voice was sharper than he intended, fueled by a protective fury that shocked him. You speak of things you do not understand. She is not what you think. I understand everything. Cairn slammed a fist onto the heavy oak table, making the maps tremble. I understand that House Brayler is here. I understand that Lady Alara Brayler is of marriageable age, that her family controls the grain shipments from the southern plains, and that an alliance with them would secure the north against famine for a generation. That is what I understand, and I will not have your poetic northern sensibilities ruin a decade of planning. The name Brayler landed like a death knell. Aris had seen Lady Alara, a girl of 17, pretty in a pale, bloodless way, with eyes that held no more life than the glass beads on her gown. A political union with her would be a living death, a surrender of everything he had just discovered in Liana's arms. I will not do it, Aris said, his voice low but steady. I cannot. His father's eyes were chips of flint. You will. You are my son. Your duty is to your house, not to your groin. You will cease all contact with the Verden woman. You will be courteous, attentive, and utterly charming to Lady Alara. Is that understood? The silence that followed was heavier than any stone in the keep. Aris said nothing, his jaw clenched, his summer blue eyes stormy with a rebellion he had never before dared to feel. It was this rebellion that led him, 2 nights later, to the hidden gate at the rear of the House of Silver Mists. The risk was immense. To be caught lurking near the home of the city's most famous courtesan would be social ruin. But the compulsion was a physical ache, a need for air in the suffocating atmosphere of his father's ambitions. He had sent no note, given no warning. He simply stood in the shadow of a great ice-laden pine, a single perfect winter bloom, a rare blue-veined flower that grew only in the northern crags, clutched in his hand. He did not have to wait long. A figure appeared on a small, secluded balcony above, wrapped in a shawl of silver fur, her face pale in the moonlight. Liana. She had felt his presence, a pull on her soul as tangible as a silken thread. She had been reading by the fire, the words a blur, her entire being attuned to the night outside. Their eyes met across the darkness. No words were spoken. She simply nodded, a slow, deliberate movement, and retreated inside. A moment later, a side door, nearly invisible behind a curtain of ivy, swung open silently. He was inside. The warmth and the scent of her, of old books, dried roses, and sandalwood, enveloped him. They stood in a small, book-lined antechamber, the only light coming from the dying embers in the hearth. The world, with all its rules and consequences, was locked outside. You should not have come, she whispered, but her hands were already reaching for him, her fingers lacing with his. They were cold from his weight in the snow. I had to, he breathed, pulling her close, burying his face in her hair, inhaling the scent of the legendary rose. It was sweeter, more real than any rumor. My father. He means to marry me to Lady Brayler. The confession hung in the air. Liana stiffened, the fear she had been holding at bay now taking solid form. Alara Brayler. It is a powerful match. It is a cage, Aris said, pulling back to look at her. In the dim light, her beauty was ethereal, haunted. Liana, what I feel for you, it is not a dalliance. It is not the fleeting passion they whisper about in the courts. From the moment I saw you, it was as if I recognized you. As if I had been searching for you my whole life and had simply forgotten. Tears, hot and unbidden, welled in Liana's eyes. They were the words of a fool, an idealist, a man who did not understand the world. And they were the most beautiful words she had ever heard. "Oh, Aris," she sighed, her voice breaking. "This world does not suffer such poets gladly. It will break you for this. It will break us." "Then let it try," he said, his voice fierce with a young man's certainty. "I would rather be broken with you than whole with anyone else." He presented the winter bloom to her. It was a humble thing compared to the enchanted rose in her hair, its petals fragile and blue as a twilight shadow. She took it, her fingers trembling as they brushed against his. It was in that touch, that exchange of a simple frozen flower, that their secret affair was truly born. It became a world within a world. Theirs was a map drawn in whispers and shadows. Stolen moments in the candlelit corridors of the great keep after official functions, where a brush of hands behind a marble column could say more than 1,000 sonnets. Secret walks in the snowy gardens at dawn, when the world was still asleep and their footprints were the first to mar the pristine white canvas. He would leave letters for her, sealed with plain wax and hidden in the hollow of a particular old oak tree in a forgotten corner of the palace grounds. She would answer in her elegant, looping script, letters filled not with the flowery prose of courtly love, but with the raw, honest outpourings of her soul. Her fears, her hopes, memories of a childhood spent in a minor now fallen house, before she had learned to wield her beauty as both shield and sword. She showed him the real Valdor, the city beneath the politics, the quiet, hidden gardens where the last of the autumn roses stubbornly clung to life under caps of snow, the archived towers where forgotten histories slept on dusty shelves, the music room where she would sometimes play the harp, her fingers pulling forth melodies of such poignant beauty that it would bring tears to his eyes. He, in turn, showed her a different kind of magic, not the subtle, symbolic whisper that clung to her rose, but the magic of unvarnished truth. He spoke of the northern reach, of the auroras that painted the sky in great, shifting curtains of green and violet, of the loyalty of his house's bannermen, of the simple, profound honor his father seemed to have forgotten. He spoke of a life that was not about survival in a gilded cage, but about building something real, something lasting. With every secret meeting, every forbidden touch, every letter passed between them, Liana felt herself being unmade and remade. The cynical, guarded shell she had cultivated for so long began to crack, and beneath it was a woman she had thought long dead. A woman who could hope, who could trust, who could love with a terrifying, absolute vulnerability. And the rose bloomed. It was more than vibrant. It was radiant, its petals seeming to hold their own light source, its fragrance so potent it would fill the small antechamber where they met. Tion Morval noticed it, of course. He saw the feverish glow in Liana's cheeks, the new softness in her eyes, and the corresponding, alarming vitality of the flower. "Liana," he said one day, his tone graver than usual. He had come to replenish her supply of calming teas and had found her staring out the window, a faint, unconscious smile on her lips. "The rose, it has never been like this. The magic is active. It is feeding." She turned to him, her happiness making her momentarily dismissive. "Feeding on what, Tion? On joy? On love? Is that such a terrible thing?" "All magic demands a price," he said. his brow furrowed with concern. "Especially magic of the heart. It is not a passive charm, Liana. It is a symbiosis. The more it flourishes, the more it is tied to your very life force. I have studied such things in the old texts. This kind of enchantment, it does not just reflect love, consumes it, and in consuming, it consumes you." His warning was a splash of cold water, but it could not extinguish the fire that now warmed her from within. "Then let it consume me," she said, her voice soft but resolute. "To feel this, even for a moment, is worth any price." Tion looked at her, at the glorious, doomed rose, and a profound sadness settled in his old eyes. He saw not a courtesan and her lover, but a tragedy unfolding in slow, beautiful motion. He saw the thorns beneath the petals, sharp and waiting. For the world outside their private sanctuary was not idle. Lord Aris Daynar was a master strategist, and he saw the change in his son, the distracted air, the defiance that had replaced obedience, the softness in his eyes when he thought no one was looking. He knew the game was still being played, and he moved his pieces accordingly. He increased the pressure, arranging more and more chance encounters with Lady Alara and her parents. The court whispers, once merely gossip, began to harden into a narrative of scandal. The northern air and the Rose of Valdor. It was a delicious, sordid tale. The walls of their beautiful secret world were beginning to close in. The thorns were starting to bite. And Liana, holding the fragile blue-veined winterbloom Aris had given her, knew that a storm was coming. She could feel it in the air, a tension that even the enchanted rose could not sweeten. The choice was no longer whether to love him, but how to save him from the consequences of that love. Part 3: The Fading Petal. Winter's grip on Valdor began to falter. It was a slow, reluctant surrender. The snowfalls grew softer, the days imperceptibly longer, though the nights still held their sharp, crystalline bite. Icicles, once mighty swords of ice depending from the eaves, now dripped a constant, melancholy rhythm onto the cobblestones below. This slow thaw mirrored the state of Liana's heart, a gradual, painful warming that left her exposed and vulnerable to a world still frozen in its ways. The secret world she and Aris had built became both a sanctuary and a battleground. Their meetings grew more frantic, more desperate, as the external pressures mounted. The hollow in the old oak tree saw a flurry of letters, each one a testament to their growing desperation. "My dearest Aris," one of hers began, the ink slightly smudged, as if written in haste or with trembling hands. "The whispers have found teeth. Lady Seraphine all but named you today, her words sweet as poisoned honey. I fear my presence is a stain upon your honor, a weapon your enemies and your father will gladly use. Perhaps we should be more cautious. A week of silence to let the storm pass?" His reply was swift, delivered by a street urchin he paid handsomely for his discretion. "My Liana, do not speak of silence. Your letters are the air I breathe in this suffocating city. Let them whisper. Honor is not defined by the gossip of court vipers. My honor is in the truth I found with you in that garden. It is in the way you make me feel, not like a lord fulfilling a duty, but a man truly alive. Do not ask me to retreat. I cannot." He was so certain, so steadfast in his idealistic fortress. She loved him for it, even as it terrified her. For she could see the machinations he refused to acknowledge. Lord Cairn's campaign was relentless. Aris was now constantly in the company of the Brailer family, attending dull musicales, riding in the newly slushy parks, forced to make polite, empty conversation with Lady Alara, who looked at him with a simpering, vacant admiration that made his skin crawl. The breaking point for Liana came during the Feast of the Thawing Streams, a traditional celebration marking the end of the deepest winter. The great hall was decked in early blooming forest blossoms and ribbons of pale green and gold. Liana, as was her custom, attended not as a guest of a particular lord, but as an acknowledged feature of the court's landscape, a rare, independent entity. She wore a gown of deep violet, the color of twilight sorrow, and her rose, pulsing with a fierce, beautiful light, was a stark contrast. She watched from her chosen shadow as Aris was paraded by his father. He was seated next to Lady Alara at the high table. Lord Cairn made a point of toasting the promising future of our great houses, his gaze sweeping the room and lingering, for a cold, calculated moment, on Liana. It was a declaration of war, as clear as any trumpet blast. Later, as the feast dissolved into music and dancing, Aris managed to break away. He found her on the same balcony where they had first spoken, the stone now wet with meltwater. "He is forcing my hand, Liana," Aris said, his voice tight with a suppressed rage she had never heard in him before. He gripped the balustrade, his knuckles white. "He speaks of contracts, of announcements. He thinks to corner me with politeness and public expectation." Liana stood beside him, not touching him, feeling the chasm between their world and his yawn wide and deep. "He is not wrong in his tactics, Aris. A public betrothal to Lady Alara would be nearly impossible to undo without causing a grievous insult to a powerful house. It would be political suicide for House Daynar." "I don't care about political suicide," he burst out, turning to her. His face was anguished, the summer in his eyes clouded by a storm. "I care about you. Only you." "You cannot say that," she whispered, her heart cracking with every word. "You are the son of a great house. To say I don't care is a luxury you were never afforded. Your care is your duty. Your name is your responsibility." She took a shuddering breath, the cold air stinging her lungs. "I will not be the ruin of you, Aris. I will not have my love be the axe that falls on your house." He reached for her then, his hand closing around her wrist. "What are you saying?" She looked down at his hand, so strong and sure, then up into his eyes, her own filled with a resolve that cost her everything. "I am saying that perhaps your father is right. Perhaps this is a fantasy, a beautiful, impossible dream. The world is real, Aris, and it will crush us." She saw the blow land, saw the light in his eyes flicker and dim. It was the cruelest thing she had ever done, and the most necessary. She was trying to build a wall between them with her own hands, to push him back to safety, even if it meant destroying her own heart in the process. "You don't mean that," he pleaded, his voice raw. "I see the truth in you, Liana. Feel it. This is not you speaking. This is fear. Fear is the only sane response to our situation," she retorted, pulling her wrist from his grasp. The absence of his touch was an immediate physical pain. "You speak of truth and feeling, but I must speak of survival. Your survival." She turned and walked away, leaving him standing alone in the cold. Each step was an agony, as if she were walking on shards of her own soul. She did not look back. She could not. If she saw the devastation on his face, her resolve would shatter. That night, in the solitude of her chambers, the first true sign of the cost manifested. She was sitting before her mirror, mechanically brushing her hair, the rhythmic motion a poor substitute for the comfort she craved. Her reflection was pale, her eyes hollow with a grief she had to keep secret from the world. And then she saw it. A single petal from the white rose in her hair detached itself. It did not fall with a dramatic flourish, but drifted down slowly, weightlessly, like a sigh. It landed on the dark wood of her dressing table, a stark, lonely little shape. She stared at it, her breath catching in her throat. She reached out a trembling finger and touched it. It was still soft, still silken, but its vibrant whiteness was tinged at the very edge with a faint, sickly gray. Tian Morval found her like that an hour later, still staring at the fallen petal as if it were a pronouncement of execution. He did not speak. He simply came and stood behind her, his hands resting on her shoulders. His reflection in the mirror was grim. "It has begun," Liana whispered, her voice hoarse. "The magic is not a limitless well," Tian said softly, his tone heavy with a sorrow he had long anticipated. "It draws from your life force, Liana. Your joy, your hope, your love. These are its fuel. But so too is your sorrow, your despair, your sacrifice. You are trying to protect him by wounding yourself. And the rose, it reflects that wound." She picked up the faded petal, holding it in her palm. It felt as fragile as her newfound happiness. "What choice do I have, Tian? To let him be destroyed for loving me?" "There is always a choice," he replied, "but rarely one without cost. You have chosen a path of sacrifice. The rose will now walk it with you." The following days were a study in exquisite torture. Liana enforced her own exile. She refused the notes left in the oak tree. When she saw Aris at court functions, she was a masterpiece of icy indifference, her gaze sliding over him as if he were a stranger. She engaged in flirtatious conversations with other, safe nobles, older men who posed no threat, who were merely part of the scenery of her life. She performed the part of the heartless courtesan so perfectly that she almost believed it herself. She saw the effect it had on him. He grew thinner, his face hardening. The open, earnest light in his eyes was replaced by a confused, wounded anger. He watched her from across rooms, his gaze a mix of betrayal and longing. The court, sensing blood in the water, feasted on the spectacle. "The northern boy has been discarded," they whispered. "The rose grows bored. She has found a new diversion." It was all a lie, a carefully constructed prison of her own making. And with every cold glance, every forced laugh, every rejection, another petal on the rose would loosen, its edge fading to that same deathly gray. She kept them all, a small growing pile of faded dreams in a tiny silver box on her nightstand. Aris, driven by a pain he could not comprehend, became reckless. One evening, as a light, cold rain fell, turning the leftover snow to a grimy slush, he confronted her. He cornered her in a deserted corridor leading to the library, his body blocking her path. "Why?" he demanded, his voice low and strained. The rain had plastered his dark hair to his forehead, and he looked wild, desperate. "Look at me, Liana. Look at me and tell me you feel nothing. Tell me the garden was a lie. Tell me the letters were a game." She forced her face into a mask of cool amusement, though her knees threatened to buckle. "My dear Lord Daynar, everything at court is a game. Surely you have learned that by now. I am a creature of beauty and conversation. I provide a temporary diversion. The winter was long. You were a charming pastime." She saw the words land like physical blows. He flinched, his hand coming up to grip the stone wall as if for support. The raw hurt in his eyes was a blade twisted in her own heart. The rose in her hair seemed to groan, and she felt a sudden dizzying weakness, a drain on her very essence. A pastime, he repeated, the word tasting like ash. He looked at her, truly looked, and for a terrifying moment, she thought he saw through the performance, saw the shattered woman weeping beneath the polished veneer. But then his expression closed. The wounded idealist was replaced by the hardened son of a northern lord. "I see," he said, his voice flat, devoid of all emotion. "Then I shall trouble you no longer, my lady. Enjoy your diversions." He turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing with a finality that shook the very foundations of her world. As he disappeared around the corner, Liana slumped against the cold stone wall, her hand flying to the rose. 2 more petals drifted down, landing at her feet in the damp corridor. They were almost entirely gray. She had succeeded. She had pushed him away, saved him from the scandal, preserved his chance at a politically secure future. She had given him back to his duty, to his house, to the world of cold, hard realities. But as she stumbled back to the house of silver mists through the weeping rain, she knew the price. The enchantment was not a mere reflection. It was a bond. In breaking his heart, she had fractured her own. And the rose, the beautiful, cursed rose, was dying. And with it, piece by piece, petal by petal, so was she. The sanctuary was gone. The thorns were no longer just a threat from the outside world. They had grown inward, piercing her from the inside out. The spring that was beginning to tentatively touch Valdor would not be hers. Her season was ending, and the fading of the white rose was its only silent herald. Part 4. The Blood Moon Confession. A brittle silence fell between them, colder and more desolate than the deepest winter. The hollow in the oak tree remained empty. The secret door in the ivy-covered wall stayed locked. Liana moved through her days at the House of Silver Mists like a specter, her vibrant spirit subdued, her laughter a carefully rehearsed echo of its former self. The pile of faded gray petals in the silver box grew, a silent, damning chronicle of her sacrifice. The rose itself was a tragic sight. Once a symbol of impossible vitality, it now bore the stark evidence of its decline. Nearly half its petals were gone, and those that remained were edged in that ashen gray, their pearlescent sheen dulled. It no longer pulsed with light. It seemed instead to absorb the light around it. A small, hungry darkness nestled in her hair. The weakness she had felt was no longer fleeting. It was a constant companion, a leaden fatigue that made the simplest tasks, climbing the stairs to her solar, lifting a heavy book, feel like monumental labors. Tion Morval became a near-constant presence, his healer's soul aching at the slow unraveling he was powerless to stop. He brewed tonics of nettle and ironwood bark, teas of sun thistle and dawnroot, anything to fortify her waning life force. But they were like trying to fill a cracked vessel. The strength he poured in would seep out again, fed to the dying flower and the love it represented. "You are fading, Liana," he said one evening, his voice gentle but firm as he checked the pulse at her wrist, which fluttered like a captured bird. "This cannot continue. The magic will consume you until there is nothing left." Liana looked out the window at the emerging spring. Buds were forming on the trees in her garden, a cruel, vibrant promise of a future she would not share. "What would you have me do, Tion? Go to him? Unravel all the pain I have wrought to protect him? To watch his house fall into ruin for my sake? That would be a slower, more public death for us both. Perhaps there is a truth that lies between the lie you live and the ruin you fear," Tion suggested, but his eyes held little hope. He was a man of science and subtle magic, and he knew the heart was a territory where both were often useless. Across the city, in the austere chambers of the keep, Aris was undergoing his own transformation. The wounded, confused boy was gone, replaced by a man carved from northern granite. He attended every function with his father, was impeccably courteous to Lady Alara, and began to involve himself in the dry intricacies of trade agreements and military logistics. He was becoming the heir his father had always wanted, competent, focused, and emotionally remote. But the cost was a hollowing out of his soul. The summer in his eyes had been extinguished, replaced by a flat, wintry blue. He saw Liana occasionally, a distant, beautiful statue surrounded by her court of admirers, and the sight was a fresh wound each time, a confirmation of her betrayal. This tense, silent war could not last. The catalyst came with the rising of the blood moon, a rare celestial event that occurred once in a generation. It was a night of potent, wild magic in Valdorian lore. A time when veils between worlds were said to thin, when secrets held too long had a way of bubbling to the surface. A grand observatory ball was held in the great keep to mark the occasion. The great dome was open to the sky, and the strange coppery light of the swollen, red-tinged moon bathed the revelers in an eerie, dramatic glow. It was a night for masks again, but this time, the masks felt less like disguises and more like admissions of the hidden selves beneath. Liana had not wanted to attend, but to refuse would have invited more speculation. She wore a gown the color of dried blood, an unconscious mirroring of the lunar spectacle above. Her rose was a skeletal thing, a handful of gray-edged petals clinging to a brittle stem. She felt transparent, as if the strange light might simply pass through her, revealing the emptiness within. She saw Aris across the crowded floor. He was not dancing. He stood with his father and the Brailer family, a glass of wine in his hand, his expression unreadable. Lady Alara was clinging to his arm, her face upturned to the red moon with a vapid awe. The sight was a physical pain, driven by a force she could not name, the strange magic of the night, the desperation of a dying woman, or simply a love that could no longer be contained. She found herself moving. She did not go to him directly. Instead, she caught his eye from across the room, held his gaze for a long charged moment, and then turned, walking slowly and deliberately towards the archway that led to the oldest part of the keep, the Whispering Gallery. It was a risk, a throw of the dice. If he did not follow, it would be the final, humiliating confirmation of her defeat. But if he did, her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic, weak flutter that left her breathless. The gallery was a long, narrow corridor lined with funerary statues of long-dead kings and queens. The acoustics were strange. A whisper spoken at one end could be heard with perfect clarity at the other, but was inaudible just a few feet away. It was a place for secrets. She had not reached the first statue when she heard his footsteps behind her, firm and quick on the stone floor. She stopped, her back to him, unable to turn. "Why?" His voice was low, stripped of the anger from their last encounter, filled now with a raw, bewildered pain that was far worse. "Why bring me here? Have you not toyed with me enough?" The words were a lash. She squeezed her eyes shut, gathering the last dregs of her strength. The blood moon's light streamed through a high, arched window, painting a crimson path on the floor between them. "Everything I said to you that night in the rain," she began, her voice a thin, reedy whisper that the gallery carried perfectly to him, "was a lie." The silence behind her was absolute. so profound she could hear the distant music from the ball, the frantic beating of her own heart. "Look at me," he commanded, his voice rough. Slowly she turned. The eerie red light illuminated her face, and he saw what he had been too hurt and angry to see before. He saw the pallor of her skin, the dark smudges beneath her eyes, the profound weariness that clung to her like a shroud. And he saw the rose, the pathetic, fading remnant of the legendary bloom. His breath caught. The cold mask of the air shattered, revealing the man beneath, horrified and understanding dawning in his eyes. "Liana," he breathed, taking a step forward. "Do you see?" she whispered, a single tear tracing a path through the rouge on her cheek. "It was never a game. The rose, it is not just a symbol. It is me. My life, my love. They are the same. And when I pushed you away, when I broke your heart to save you from your father's schemes, from the ruin of your name, I began to break myself." She swayed on her feet, and he was there in an instant, his arms closing around her, holding her up. The contact was an electric shock, a surge of warmth and life after so long in the cold. He felt how thin she had become, how fragile. "Gods," he muttered, his face buried in her hair, his voice thick with emotion. "You foolish, brave, impossible woman. You thought this was the way. What other way was there?" She wept, her body trembling against his solid strength. "He would have destroyed you. I could not live with that. I thought it would be easier for you to hate me." "Easier?" he choked out, holding her tighter. "Liana, you have carved out my soul. There is no life for me without you, political alliance or not. Honor means nothing if it requires the betrayal of my own heart." He pulled back slightly, his hands cupping her face, his thumbs wiping away her tears. In the bloody light of the moon, his eyes were fierce, blazing with a new determined fire. "I do not care about the scandal. I do not care about my father's ambitions. I love you, only you, and I will not lose you to this cursed enchantment." He looked at the dying rose, a new understanding hardening his features. "It feeds on your love, doesn't it? And your sorrow is starving it." She nodded weakly. "Tion says it consumes my life force. To love is to feed it, but to love in this world is to suffer. It is a paradox with only one end." "Then we change the world," Aris said, his voice ringing with a certainty that brooked no argument. "Or we leave it. My uncle has lands in the far western isles, beyond the reach of Valdorian politics. We can go there. Tonight. Now." It was a mad, impossible plan. A flight into the unknown. It would mean him abandoning his title, his inheritance, everything. "Your father would hunt you," she protested, even as a wild, desperate hope began to flicker in her chest. "Let him try," Aris said, a grim smile touching his lips. "The North teaches a man how to disappear into a landscape. We will go to the port tonight. I have friends, men loyal to me, not my father. We can be on a ship by dawn." He looked at her, his gaze unwavering. "But you must choose, Liana. You must choose to live. To fight. You must choose to love me, not as a secret to be hidden, but as a truth to be lived whatever the cost. Let the rose consume you in a blaze of life, not let it wither in the shadows of fear." In that moment, in the haunted gallery under the blood-red moon, Liana Verden made her choice. The lie was over. The pretense was finished. She would not die a slow death of quiet sacrifice. If she was to burn, it would be in the glorious, defiant fire of their love. She stood on her toes and kissed him, a kiss not of farewell but of covenant. It was a kiss of promise, of a future stolen from the jaws of fate. "I choose you," she whispered against his lips. "I choose us." As their lips met, a shiver ran through the rose in her hair. It was not a shudder of death, but a tremor of shock. A single gray-edged petal poised to fall seemed to stiffen, its ashen color holding firm, as if the decay had been momentarily stayed. The escape was on. The game was no longer one of hiding but of flight. Under the watchful, bloody eye of the moon, their final, most dangerous dance began. Part 5: The Flight of the Rose. The world narrowed to the space between heartbeats, to the frantic scuff of their boots on cold stone. The grand music of the ball faded behind them, replaced by the frantic symphony of their own breathing and the distant, rising howl of the wind, a sudden squall sweeping in from the sea, as if the very elements were being stirred by the turmoil of their decision. There was no time for farewells, for sentimental looks back at the gilded cage. Aris's mind, so long stifled by courtly intrigue, now worked with the sharp, clean clarity of a military campaign. He led her not towards the main gates, where his father's eyes would certainly be watching, but down a spiraling, seldom-used servant's staircase that smelled of damp and old mortar. Their descent was a plunge into the bowels of the keep, a world of rough-hewn walls and flickering rushlights that cast long, dancing shadows. "My man Cale will be at the postern gate by the old stables," Aris whispered, his voice tight but steady. His hand was a firm, warm anchor around hers. "He served under me during the border skirmishes. He is loyal. He has horses, supplies." Liana said nothing, saving her breath, her strength focused solely on putting one foot in front of the other. The surge of adrenaline from their confession was already fading, leaving the familiar, draining weakness in its wake. The rose felt heavy in her hair, a leaden weight pulling her down. Yet, with every step that took her further from the lies and closer to him, a fragile new energy seemed to thread through her veins, not enough to restore her, but enough to keep her moving. They emerged into the chaotic open yard of the royal stables. The squall had arrived in earnest, whipping rain and sleet horizontally across the cobblestones. The blood moon was now a smudge of dull orange behind racing bruised clouds. In the lee of a great half-rotten hay cart, a hulking figure stood holding the reins of two sturdy, dark-coated northern cobs, their breath pluming in the frigid air. Cale was a man of few words, his face a roadmap of old scars, his eyes missing nothing. He gave a curt nod to Aris and helped Liana onto her horse with a surprising gentleness. "The west road is being watched, my lord," Cale grunted, his voice a low rumble. "Your father anticipated something. He has men at the city gates." Aris's jaw tightened. "The river, then? The fisher's path?" Cale's eyes widened a fraction, a rare show of surprise. "It's treacherous in this weather. Near flooded." "It's the one path he won't expect," Aris said, his gaze meeting Liana's. It was a question. The fisher's path was a narrow, crumbling track that ran along the base of the cliffs beside the raging river Sorrow, used only by the desperate and the foolhardy. Liana nodded, her face pale but resolute. "Any path with you?" They rode out of the yard, not at a gallop that would draw attention, but at a brisk, purposeful trot, keeping to the darkest alleys of the lower city. The rain soaked through Liana's fine gown in minutes, the cold a shocking, bracing agony. She clutched the mane of her horse, her knuckles white, her body trembling with a mixture of cold and exhaustion. Aris rode close beside her, a constant protective presence, his eyes constantly scanning the shadows. Behind them, the alarm was raised. It started as a distant bell, then another, a metallic, dissonant chorus that was quickly swallowed by the storm. Lord Daynar was not a man to be deceived for long. The discovery of their absence from the ball would have been swift, his response merciless. They reached the city's edge where the walls met the roaring river. The fisher's path was even worse than Cale had described. A slick, muddy ribbon barely wide enough for a single horse, with the black churning water on one side and a sheer, unforgiving cliff face on the other. The wind screamed down the gorge, tearing at their clothes, threatening to pluck them from their saddles and dash them into the abyss. "Stay close to the rock," Aris shouted over the gale, his voice barely audible. They inched forward, the horses skittish, their hooves slipping on the wet stone. The world was reduced to this: the howl of the wind, the roar of the river, the feel of the rain-lashed rock against her shoulder, and the dim, determined shape of Aris ahead of her. Liana focused on the patch of his dark cloak, using it as a lodestar. The rose was a constant, painful throb against her temple, a reminder that her body was failing even as her spirit fought for freedom. It was Cale, riding at the rear, who heard it first. He let out a sharp, guttural curse. "Riders!" On the ridge above, Aris twisted in his saddle. Through the sheets of rain, they could see the flicker of torches, the distant silhouettes of horsemen moving along the high road that overlooked the gorge. A shout echoed down, fragmented by the wind. "Daynar! Halt in the name of your father!" An arrow whistled out of the darkness, splintering harmlessly against the cliff face, a dozen yards ahead. It was a warning shot. The next would not be. "They'll pick us off like ducks on a pond," Cale yelled. "We have to make for the crossing." Ahead, the path curved around a jutting shoulder of rock. Just beyond it, Aris knew, was the Riven Crossing, a precarious ancient bridge of rope and weathered planks that spanned the narrowest, most violent part of the gorge. It was a gamble of last resort. They urged the terrified horses into a reckless sliding gallop. Arrows now thudded into the mud around them, one grazing Cale's shoulder with a sickening tear of fabric and flesh. He grunted in pain but did not slow. The bridge came into view, a spectral thing dancing in the storm. It looked impossibly frail, lashed by wind and spray. "Go, Liana! Now!" Aris commanded, leaping from his horse and drawing his sword to stand between her and their pursuers. Cale was already at the bridge, testing the ropes with his good arm. "It'll hold. Go, my lady." Liana dismounted, her legs buckling beneath her. Aris caught her, his arm around her waist, half carrying, half dragging her onto the swaying bridge. The planks groaned and shifted under their weight. The river roared hungrily below, a maw of white water and jagged rocks. She looked back, her vision blurring. Cale stood his ground at the bridgehead, his own sword now in hand, a lone, formidable figure against the advancing torches. He would hold the line. He would buy them time with his life. "Cale!" Aris's voice was thick with anguish and gratitude. "Go, my lord!" the big man roared, not turning around. "Live!" Aris turned, his face a mask of grim purpose, and pulled Liana across the heaving bridge. The world was a vortex of wind, water, and wood. She focused on his back, on the feel of his hand crushing hers, on putting one foot in front of the other on the treacherous, swinging planks. They were halfway across when she heard the clash of steel and a furious shout from the far side. She dared not look back. The pursuit was on the bridge now. They could feel the vibrations of other footsteps. hear the shouts closing in. An arrow loosed by a pursuer on the bridge itself sang past Aris's head. He turned, pushing Liana behind him, his sword raised. There were two of them, guardsmen in the livery of House Daynar, their faces set in determined grimaces under their helmets. The fight on the swaying bridge was a nightmare of balance and brutality. Aris fought with the fierce, efficient strength of the north, his movements sure despite the chaotic lurching of the platform. Steel clashed, sparks flying briefly in the gloom. He disarmed one man with a powerful twist of his blade, sending the soldier's sword spinning into the gorge. The second lunged, and Aris met him with a parry that shoved the man off balance. With a cry, the guardsman tumbled over the side, his scream swallowed by the river's roar. But in the moment of his victory, the first guardsman, desperate, tackled Aris low around the waist. They crashed against the bridge's rope railing. The old rain-sodden hemp groaned, strained, and then with a sound like a dying sigh, it snapped. Liana screamed as Aris and the guardsman spilled over the side. For a heart-stopping second, they hung there, Aris's free hand clawing at the remaining rope, his other still locked in a struggle with the guardsman. Then the soldier's grip failed and he fell, vanishing into the darkness below. Aris dangled by one arm, his body slamming against the cliff face. The bridge swung wildly, violently. "Aris!" Liana scrambled towards him, falling to her knees at the edge, reaching down. Their fingers brushed, slipped. The rain made their skin slick. His face was a contortion of pain and effort, his grip on the wet rope weakening. "Liana!" he gasped, his eyes locked on hers. In that suspended moment, hanging between life and death, something shifted in Liana. A final defiant surge of will, a refusal to have come this far only to lose him to the cold, dark water. This was the cost. This was the consumption. And she would pay it gladly. She lunged forward, ignoring the dizzying drop, and seized his wrist with both her hands. It was a grip born of something beyond physical strength, a power fed by the very essence the rose was consuming. A searing white-hot pain shot through her, centering on the flower in her hair. She felt as if her soul were being pulled through a keyhole, but she held on. With a guttural cry she pulled, her own body scraping across the rough planks. Aris, fueled by her impossible strength, managed to get his other arm up, and then his elbow, heaving himself back onto the bridge. They collapsed together in a heap, gasping, trembling, the storm raging around them. The remaining pursuers on the far side, having seen the fate of their comrades, hesitated, the fury of the river and the broken bridge giving them pause. Aris held her, his body shaking with adrenaline and relief. How did you?" Liana could only shake her head, her vision swimming. The pain was receding, leaving behind a profound, bone-deep emptiness. She reached up, her fingers touching the rose. Another petal came away in her hand, this one not gray, but pure, blinding white, as if it had burned away its own decay in that single desperate act. It was the most beautiful it had been since the night they met, and its beauty was a harbinger of the end. She had poured too much of herself into that one moment. She tucked the perfect white petal into the folds of her sodden gown. "We have to keep moving," Aris said, his voice hoarse. He helped her to her feet. The far side of the gorge was close now. Freedom was a dark, wooded slope just beyond. They stumbled off the bridge and into the shelter of the trees, leaving the lights and the fury of Viridian behind. They had escaped. They were free. But as they vanished into the welcoming darkness of the forest, Liana leaned heavily against Aris, her steps faltering. The glorious, defiant blaze had passed. All that was left was the fading ember. The flight was over, but the final gentle fall was yet to come. Part 6. The petal on the wind. The forest was a sanctuary of whispers. The frantic roar of the river and the shouting of men faded into a hush of dripping leaves and the soft, wet sigh of the wind through pine needles. They walked until the gray light of dawn began to filter through the canopy, revealing a world washed clean and trembling. The storm had passed, leaving behind a profound, bruised silence. Aris found a shepherd's hut, long abandoned, tucked against a granite outcrop. He half-carried Liana inside, his heart clenching at the dead weight of her in his arms. The hut was a single room of dirt and stone, smelling of old wool and damp earth, but it was a fortress after the chaos of the night. He built a small, careful fire in the hearth, its flickering light revealing the true extent of her decline. She was ethereal, a creature of smoke and memory. Her skin was translucent, the veins mapping a delicate, blue tracery at her temples and wrists. But her eyes, when she opened them, were peaceful. The rose, nestled in her hair which had come partially undone, was a paradox. The few remaining petals were now a luminous, impossible white, so pure they seemed to generate their own light in the dim hut. Yet the stem itself looked brittle, as if it were made of glass. "We made it," Aris whispered, kneeling before her, chafing her cold hands between his. He tried to inject hope into his voice, but it cracked with fear. Liana offered him a faint, radiant smile. It was the smile from the garden, the one that held no shadows. "We did," she breathed. "We are free." He told her of his plan. Kale had arranged for a fishing boat, loyal to House Daynar's western allies, to wait in a secluded cove a day's journey down the coast. From there they would sail to the Outer Isles, a chain of misty, green jewels where names like Daynar and Verden held no power, where they could simply be Aris and Liana. She listened, her head resting against his shoulder, but he could feel the distance growing in her. She was like a shore he was slowly drifting from. "Tell me about the islands," she murmured, her voice a thread of sound. "Tell me about our home." So he painted a picture for her with words, his voice a low, steady anchor in the rising tide of his panic. He spoke of black sand beaches and sea stacks crowned with gulls, of turf-roofed cottages smelling of peat smoke and salt, of the strange, midnight sun that barely dipped below the horizon in summer. He spoke of a life without whispers, without masks, a life where he could build a fishing boat with his own hands and she could plant a garden, a real one with ordinary mortal flowers. "It sounds like a dream," she sighed, her eyes closed. "It is not a dream," he said fiercely, kissing her forehead. "It is our future. You must hold on, Liana. You must fight." "I am tired, my love," she whispered. "So very tired." The day passed in a hazy limbo. He managed to get her to sip some water from his flask, but she could not eat. She drifted in and out of a light, restless sleep, her dreams pulling her away from him for minutes, then hours at a time. Each time she awoke, her gaze was a little more distant, focused on something just beyond the walls of the hut. As twilight began to bleed into the forest once more, she asked him to help her outside. He wrapped her in his cloak, its heavy wool swallowing her frail form, and carried her to a fallen log that overlooked a small, clear stream, swollen with the previous night's rains. The air was cold and sharp, carrying the scent of wet earth and awakening things. The first brave stars pricked the violet sky. She sat within the circle of his arms, her back against his chest, drawing strength from his solid warmth. For a long time they were silent, listening to the water's gentle rush. "The rose," she said softly, her hand rising to touch it. "It was never a curse, Aris. It was a gift. It showed me the truth of my own heart. It allowed me to love you with an absoluteness I would never have dared otherwise. To love knowing the cost is the purest form of love there is." Tears streamed down Aris's face, silent and hot. He pressed his cheek against her hair, inhaling the fading scent of the rose, now mixed with the smell of the forest and the poignant sweetness of decay. "I would have lived 1,000 lifetimes of obscurity to spare you this," he choked out. "And I would have lived 1,000 lifetimes of pain for one true moment with you," she replied. Her voice was clear, a bell tolling softly in the twilight. "Do not grieve for what is lost. Be glad for what we had. We found each other in a world of shadows. We loved in a season of ice. We changed each other's destiny. That is more than most souls are ever granted." She turned her head slightly, her twilight eyes finding his. There was no fear in them, only a deep, abiding peace and a love so vast it seemed to fill the clearing. "Promise me you will live, Aris. Promise me you will go to the islands. You will feel the sun on your face and the salt spray on your skin. You will remember me not with sorrow, but with the joy of what we stole from fate." He could not speak. He could only nod, a ragged, broken movement. She smiled, a final breathtaking gift of serenity. Then, with an effort that seemed to take the last of her strength, she reached up and carefully, deliberately, unpinned the white rose from her hair. She held it in her palm, its petals glowing like captured moonlight against her pale skin. It was the most beautiful it had ever been, a perfect miniature star. "It is time to let it go," she whispered. She did not crumble it. She did not throw it. With a gentle, graceful motion, she simply opened her hand and offered it to the wind. A soft breeze, born of the coming night, stirred the branches above. It dipped down, caught the rose, and lifted it from her palm. For a moment it hovered there, a spinning, luminous soul against the darkening pines. Then the wind carried it away, over the stream into the vast, waiting embrace of the forest. As the rose disappeared from sight, Liana let out a soft, final sigh. Her body relaxed utterly against his, her head lolling gently onto his shoulder. The immense, quiet love in her eyes did not vanish, but settled, becoming a part of the stillness that enveloped her. She was gone. Aris held her, his body racked with silent sobs, his tears falling into her hair. The world was utterly silent, holding its breath. He did not know how long he sat there, clinging to the empty vessel that had held the most magnificent spirit he would ever know. It was then that he saw it. A soft, white glow began to emanate from the forest floor where the rose had flown. Then another and another. All across the stream bank, in the moss, between the roots of the trees, tiny, perfect white roses began to bloom. They pushed through the damp earth and the fallen leaves, their petals unfurling in the starlight, each one a replica of the flower she had worn. They spread, a silent, gentle wave of white, filling the clearing with a soft, pearlescent radiance and a fragrance of such heartbreaking sweetness it made the air ache. It was not a resurrection. It was a transformation. Her love, the very life force the rose had consumed, had not died with her. It had been released, given back to the world, and the world, for a single miraculous heartbeat, had bloomed in response. Aris looked at the field of white roses, then down at the peaceful face of the woman in his arms. The devastating pain was still there, a raw, open wound. but woven through it was a thread of that same impossible peace he had seen in her eyes. She had not been consumed by the magic. She had mastered it. In the end, her love had not been her doom, but her triumph. He gathered her up and carried her back into the hut. He would bury her there, in that quiet clearing among the roses that were her legacy. He would mark the spot with a simple stone, and then he would keep his promise. He would go to the islands. He would feel the sun and the salt spray. He would live, and he would remember. For love, true love, never really dies. It simply changes form. It becomes the memory that warms you on a cold night, the strength that guides you through a storm, the scent of roses on a winter wind. It becomes a part of the story you tell, not to grieve, but to remember the beauty that was, and the peace that forever follows. And so the final petal falls, and our time in the kingdom of Valdor comes to a close. I thank you, dear listener, for allowing me to share this story of fragile beauty and eternal love with you. If the tale of Liana and Aris touched your heart, if it made you feel the chill of the snow and the warmth of a single defiant flame, then my purpose is fulfilled. But every ending in one story is a beginning for another. Here at Valor Romantasy Audiobook, we believe in the power of stories to transport, to transform, and to mend the heart. There are more worlds to explore, more whispered secrets to uncover, more loves that defy destiny itself. Your journey with us doesn't have to end here. By subscribing to the channel, you ensure you never miss our next foray into tales of epic love and grand adventure. Leave a like if you wish to see more stories like the Rose of Valdor, and let your voice be heard in the comments. Tell me which moment stayed with you long after the final word. Did the white rose capture your imagination? Was it a specific whisper in the candlelit corridors that held your heart? Your thoughts and subscriptions are the magic that allows me to continue bringing these narratives to life for you. Until next time, may your own story be filled with courage, and your heart ever open to a little magic. This is Valor Romantasy, signing off for now. Remember to subscribe,